Okay, so welcome to the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. And as a guest today, we have back here Ali Gilbert. Welcome, Ali.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
That's a pleasure. So let's talk about dieting and its influence on hormones. So especially many guys, when they cut too hard, too long, or with not enough protein, they tend to drop body fat, but they also drop their levels of testosterone. So what is the exact mechanism that make that happen?
This is the TRT and Hormone Optimization YouTube channel. And if you want to learn all about the science-based information on this topic, consider subscribing, hit that notification bell, and you'll be on your way.
So it's funny because, whenever somebody wants to lose weight, and you and I define losing weight as, all right, you don't necessarily want to lose weight so much as you want to drop body fat, but people will tie that in because obviously we can make the joke like, well, we can get you to lose weight by tomorrow, just chop your arm off or whatever. So the media tends to just push the message of just decreasing calories by slashing them and then increasing output via exercise and activity and stuff. And so I think it's not just the United States, but it's everywhere that takes things to the extreme where if a little bit of exercise and a little bit of calorie decrease is good, all of it might be better. And the problem with that is that your body is a very intelligent thing. So this thing that we live in, right? It senses when you're not feeding it enough for the activity that you're doing. So it says, all right, well, if you're a guy, it says, sir, you're not giving me enough fuel. So therefore, I'm going to kind of get rid of all body processes that are not necessary. One of those being procreation. So it's going to get rid of the rock hard boners. It's going to get rid of the erections and the libido or wanting to have sex by lowering testosterone, increasing your fatigue, increasing your cravings, increasing your hunger, decreasing your energy. So it's very similar to a car where I compare a Prius to, I don't know if you guys have heard of a Rezvani tank. I love trucks. And so Rezvani tanks are like these $300,000 trucks that literally get like 4 miles to the gallon. You don't want to necessarily be like a Prius. You want to be like a tank. You want to burn through fuel really quickly so your body has to replenish. But what happens is if you're not giving your body that fuel or replenishing, you become more like a Prius and you don't need to take in so much to operate. So your body senses that. And so it kind of down regulates all your body's processes. And testosterone is one of the bigger ones. And you just know as well as I do with bodybuilders, the way they look on stage, they look amazing. But if you did their blood work, it would be terrible. For the natural guys, it would be completely terrible. You would say, oh my God, this guy needs to go to the hospital right now because their testosterone would be through the floor. And so that's where, it becomes very dangerous. And then people will do that constantly over time until all of a sudden, well, I'm not losing any more fat. I got to decrease calories more and increase exercise more. And it's just this repetitive, vicious cycle to where it doesn't work and there's nowhere else to go.
Any changes in other hormones than the sex hormones?
Yeah, so thyroid is a big one too. Thyroid hormone is kind of like, the master metabolic hormone, and that will crash quicker than testosterone actually. And they've shown that it can be as little as maybe 4 days of dieting drastically, right? We're not talking a little calorie deficit, we're talking a major one. So thyroid's also going to decrease because your body's like, oh my gosh, I don't have fuel to burn. I really, really need to kind of hold on to everything that I'm doing. And so one of the things that most people do is they bring down carbs. We know that carbs increase thyroid output, and that's kind of one of the logic or theories behind doing refeeds, which tend to be higher in carbohydrates, and why they work so well for people is that it helps increase thyroid. And leptin is also another hormone. So leptin is the one that makes us feel full. Well, if you're not full ever and you're not eating enough, your body's going to say, screw you, I'm just going to make you hungry, because it doesn't know the difference between being in the wilderness starving or starving because it's controlled starvation, which is what dieting is. Ghrelin, so the way to differentiate the hunger hormones, leptin being the full hormone, ghrelin, the stomach, all of a sudden it increases that and it's going to make you hungrier. And your body's like, okay, cool, just give me all the fuel. And at some point, somebody's going to binge when they do this for a long time. And that's kind of when things start to spiral. Cortisol will also go up. Cortisol, the main stressor hormone. And that's also very problematic, mostly more in women, but also in men. So a lot of my men who cut too hard, they think they're getting fat, but they're actually increasing water. And the leaner you are, the more you're going to notice this, because the leaner you are, when you do retain water, you retain it in the same place that you would store fat. And it looks and feels kind of the same to somebody. And so they're like, I feel fluffy, I feel fat. Whereas if you actually increase carbohydrates and maybe trained a day or two less for a week, you may feel and look leaner, but it's actually just the decrease in cortisol. Insulin can also go down, which we know is not going to be a good thing if you're trying to maintain or add on muscle. And so then testosterone and even estrogen in men can go down, which we all know is very bad, especially for libido and insulin resistance as well. It can increase insulin resistance. So, you know, it obviously crashes like your entire motherboard system, and we don't want that to happen. And that's why people take it to the extreme and they do it for too long and then they don't take a break. So the leaner you are, the more you have to take diet breaks. People don't understand that. We all have been there too. So
what is your general advice to prevent all this?
So you kind of have to take an assessment of yourself. So if you're somebody, if you're a man who wants to lose body fat, take a really honest assessment. Are you physiologically ready? Have you spent the last however many years trying to get leaner, you know, running that red line where you're not taking in enough calories, all of a sudden your energy goes to shit, your workouts are going to shit, you're not adding muscle, your libido has suffered, you have GI issues, you just feel overall like, oh, I got to go train, versus waking up saying, I feel refreshed, I want to train. If you have any of those negative symptoms, you may need to spend more time eating more and then training a little less. And everyone asks me, well, what does that look like? Because it sounds ass backwards from what I'm told. And I say, yeah, I know, but it works. The people that are the biggest offenders of this are all my military veterans, because their mentality is so used to pushing through anything that it's very foreign a concept for them to actually rest. So taking an honest assessment of where you are and actually, have you earned the right to diet is really what that is. So if you have not earned that right, I would say if you're training 6 days a week, let's go down to 3, make it 3 total body workouts, up your calories a little bit. Most people have about a 40% buffer that they can add calories, and your weight may not change at all. You may even lose weight. Add some calories and then assess how you feel. Is your hunger better? Is your energy more stable? Are you sleeping better? That's a big one. If you're not sleeping well, you're not going to be able to recover better. On the other hand, if you have earned the right to diet, then depending on how lean you are, will determine how long you should spend in a calorie deficit. And the goal is to always eat as much food as possible while still dropping body fat. So we don't have to cut all the calories. We can start with maybe a 15% calorie deficit and then spend time going through that. Yes, you can do a 40% deficit and that will work quickly within 3 weeks, but then where does that leave you? You have nowhere to go. If you add all the cardio and take away all the food at once, sure, it's going to work for everybody, but then pulling yourself out of that is going to rebound a lot harder. Play the long game, take your time. There's no rush. take your time, do it the right way, do it once, drop the weight, and then it's really just a game of maintaining it throughout the rest of your life. And then it's a lot easier to drop into a deficit, drop some weight, 3 to 6 weeks if you're leaner, longer if you have a little more body fat or stored energy, as I like to say. And then you spend some time eating more at maintenance calories. So if you go for a 3-week aggressive deficit, then come out of that for a few months, eat at maintenance, and then go back into a deficit. Whereas everybody else likes to spend 9 months out of the year trying to diet, and it just backfires on them.
Is there a certain body fat percentage at which all these metabolic changes happen? Are we talking, for example, about 5% like a bodybuilder on stage, or rather the 10-12% where a lot of lean guys can stay year round?
It's really individual. Like you'll see guys who, most guys, they start to get pretty soft when they're approaching 20%. And so then it's a game of, all right, well, whose body can handle what at what point in getting lean? Because I've seen guys who are at 12 to 14% body fat, and they start to experience some of these negative symptoms. Whereas other guys, they're pushing 6 to 8%. That's really hard to maintain year round, especially naturally. So getting down that lean, you're going to have some problems. It's not if, it's just when. And so it's very individual as to how long that will take to manifest, but it's going to happen. And there's a reason why, sub 8% is really unrealistic for anybody to hold for any really particular length of time. I know in women, it's very variable too, because they may lose their cycle at 23% or some women don't lose it until they hit 14 or below. So it's really assessing how you're feeling from those biometrics of sleep, hunger, your mood, your energy, your cravings. Another thing that I forgot to mention is body temperature. So taking your temperature in the morning and then taking it around, 3 or 4 p.m., not around a meal, but see if that changes at all. So I use kilos and I use Celsius because I think it's a lot more accurate. If you have somebody who wakes up at 37 degrees and in the afternoon, they start dropping 35, it might be time to take a diet break. Or if they completely drop to 35 across the board throughout the week, it's like, yo, we got to get some food back in you. That's a sign thyroid's starting to crash, metabolic rate is coming down, because again, that's where everyone gets into trouble. Your body senses you're not giving it the fuel it needs. So it's going to make your metabolic rate lower than when you started. So your maintenance calories used to be like 2,800. Your new maintenance might be like 2,500 because you haven't been giving your body enough fuel. And so then essentially you could be in a surplus and gain body fat. And that's kind of like, people think it's starvation mode or whatever, but it's really more your body just adapting to what you're actually doing because you're doing it for way too long. I know that's like a tangent answer to the question, but they're very important tangents to pay attention to, because there is so much that goes on. And we think, oh, if we don't get instant results, nothing's happening, we just got to push harder. Where if you're just a little patient, things will happen and fall into place. And that's why it's important not to just go by the scale, go by circumference, go by how you're feeling, pictures, body temperature. You can even do blood pressure, glucose. Like there's so many data points that someone can do or their coach can do that can show them, look, you're actually improving, even though it might not say it on the scale. And you don't want the scale to drop that quickly if you're trying to just drop body fat and preserve your muscle, because that's not a good sign. You're going to start dropping tissue that's metabolically active, and then you're going to have even more trouble trying to lose fat.
I've heard you mention several times as a natural. What does that mean exactly? Is it different for guys on TRT, or do you mean the use of heavy anabolic steroids?
I like that question too. So I would think that TRT, because it's a therapeutic dose and tends to be lower than super physiological, is similar to natural. So as you know, guys who go on TRT, they may not see these overwhelming benefit aesthetically. You still got to do the work. You still have to go through everything. If anything, it's going to help the recovery process tremendously in the form of sleep, and the ability to retain nitrogen. But if you're taking in enough protein, that should be helping as well. Somebody who's on heavy anabolic use, you're still going to have to do the work and everything. But if they're on stage and looking shredded, obviously their natural levels are not going to be the same as somebody who is not on TRT or anything else. So you're still going to experience some of the metabolic changes in a negative way, just not as amplified as somebody who is not on anything, because the recovery is what gets hindered the most. And so even in that standpoint, people who are on something or not, nowadays everyone's like, oh, I don't have to do cardio, like, hashtag fuck cardio or whatever. I only need to do interval training. And I've talked about this before, but literally beta oxidation is the technical term to break down fat and use it for energy. It requires oxygen. So aerobic fitness is imperative to have in order to use carbs and fats. And so the more aerobically fit somebody is, the better they're going to recover in between workouts, in between sets, the better they'll actually use the carbs and fats. You'll be able to preserve muscle. You're eating enough protein. It's not going to kill your gains doing aerobic work. If that's all you're doing and you're doing high ultra endurance events, yeah, then we could talk, another conversation. But it's so important because the anaerobic training is without oxygen. So you're going to be in a good position if you do the aerobic work first. Then you can come and revisit the interval training and stuff like that, and that will maintain your cardio fitness. But for the aerobic work, front load it. Do 6 to 8 weeks of like steady state aerobics in the beginning of a program, and then you're set. And then you can use those carbs and fats. So that's my tangent on that.
Okay. So maybe last important question. How to reverse all these metabolic changes if they've already happened in someone that dieted down?
So one of the bigger things in dieting down, when you're dropping muscle mass, you're dropping you're taking shelves away from the wall, where that's a form of storage for fuel. It's a form of storage for anything that we're taking in. When that's gone, we can't take in as much as we used to. So this is similar to somebody who competes. They come off stage, they eat 14 cupcakes, a pizza, like all that stuff. The next day they look like they're on prednisone, and all of a sudden they blow up. Obviously a lot of that is water and all that stuff, but the body's like, yo, what did you just do? So when people come to me and they've been chronically under eating for a very long time, which is probably 99% of people who come to me, I have to assess, all right, have they earned the right to actually keep doing what they're doing? No. First thing we have to do is add calories back in. So I have to calculate what their theoretic maintenance calories is based on the activity that I'm going to have them doing, based on their body composition and all that. And a lot of the times when people do their own calorie intake, they don't take into account their activity. They're like, oh, my BMR is 1800, so I'm going to eat 1800. I've had guys come to me eating 1800, and I'm like, bro, I eat that for a dieting day. Like, come on. So we have to increase calories, and it's not throwing all the calories at once. It's incremental amounts. Some people call that reverse dieting. I would call what I do like accelerated reverse dieting. Why stay in a deficit longer? Let's try to get as much as we can in. Then we will assess hunger, energy, cravings, and sleep. Usually sleep will improve, especially if we're adding carbohydrates, which we usually are. People's weight rarely changes that much. I've had guys where I've increased their calories 700 to 800. Their weight goes up like 0.4. I mean, it's crazy. And if anything, the weight goes up because of a water retention effect, or there's more stored glycogen in the muscle. If they're training a lot, we take that down too. So obviously I would never take training away unless somebody is extremely compromised, where, you know, their HRV is through the floor, their resting heart rate is like 100, you know, if somebody's like lethargic, they can't sleep, all that stuff, we can't really add a stressor via training. So if they're training a lot, we reduce that, we reduce the volume, we reduce the intensity a little bit. I add a lot of walking, because walking is really the one thing you can do as long as you want without a negative impact on hunger hormones or anything else. If anything, it lowers cortisol. Then we just kind of assess and see how the person feels as they go on. And then once all the metrics are looking good and their biofeedback is good, then we can start to up the ante a little bit. But I'm not going to let them diet for a long time. Usually most people, I would say, listen, we've got to spend like at least 3 to 6 months eating more, and you can train more if you eat more. And it doesn't mean you're going to gain body fat. It's just that we're getting your body to a point where, we're increasing work capacity, we're increasing the amount of calories that you eat, so that the next time you do diet, you're not eating 1,000 calories less than you really need to, which is what a lot of people do. So we want that dieting point to, yes, you're going to have to suffer a little bit, but it's not going to be so impactful on your endocrine system and your metabolism to the point we have to rehab it again and spend all this time repairing.
Have you ever had clients that were never be able to recover their metabolic changes?
No, I haven't. I had one guy who spent over a year because he did keto strictly for 3 years. And then on top of the keto was doing a lot of glycolytic training, and it was lower calorie and everything. So we spent upwards of over a year getting him back to where he needs to be. And now it's like super simple that if I just drop him in a deficit, he drops weight, but he spends the majority of the year not in a deficit. But I haven't had anybody that's been so deep in the hole that we haven't been able to bring them out. It's just a matter of time, and I have to educate them on how long realistically this will take. So, sometimes people aren't ready for it, and that's totally fine. But I will not compromise my integrity as a coach and say, all right, well, yeah, I'll get you to lose weight in 3 months and then see you later. How many people have we had come to us after they go to those coaches? So I haven't had anybody kind of say no. Usually they're at the point where like, I have nowhere else to go. I don't know what to do. I need to spend time doing this and I'm ready. I'm like, all right, good. It's going to take like a year.
Yeah. Are there any supplements that you would recommend in helping to restore those metabolic changes?
If somebody's not on a high quality multivitamin, I know it seems so basic, but it really does work, especially with a good B complex, because we literally chew up our B vitamins through any stressful activity, stressful training, stuff like that. So if somebody's not willing to take a multivitamin, fine, get them on a really good B complex, but you need all those cofactors in the multivitamin for the food that you're eating to work as best and efficiently as you can. And I'm not talking something like nature made from CVS or whatever. Like, I personally use Thorne supplements, something that is pharmaceutical grade, that is very high quality. Creatine's been studied for like 70 years. Like, it's an amazing supplement. It can help with recovery and, muscle retention. Fish oil, if somebody doesn't eat a lot of fish, but even if they are eating a lot of fish, usually that omega-3 to 6 ratio is very out of balance. That can help with inflammation. It can help with insulin sensitivity and achieving the omega-3 fat level. Those are kind of like the basics in addition to vitamin D. And if somebody's got severe dysfunctional cortisol rhythm or circadian rhythm, melatonin absolutely can be helpful for sleep. Maybe something like phosphatidylserine or 5-HTP, depending on if they're on a SSRI or not, to help that calming effect at night, to get them on a good sleep-wake cycle. A lot of people who binge Netflix at night, I'm like, yo, wake up really early and watch your shows in the morning. I started doing that, like watching at 5 a.m. And I'm like, all right, cool. Because then, you can get that done and then you can start, prepping your body for sleep later in the day. But there are no supplements that are going to outwardly expedite the process. This is something that'll just complement everything that they're doing nutritionally. And that may or may not include DHEA and TRT if they need it. Sometimes they're so deep in the hole too, their hormones are erect, they may need to go on HRT. sooner than they want to, but that's fine because I think it's inevitable that everybody will end up on it anyway at some point in their lives. So
yeah, well, great advice, Ali. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was fun.
And now give this video a thumbs up and go watch one of these videos to learn a ton more about TRT and hormone optimization.